Welcome to Half Century Hangout, where different paths lead to the same table. I'm your host, John, joined by my friends and co-hosts, Luke and Chuck. We're three guys who grew up differently but became good friends with a lot to talk about. On this show, we bring our unique perspectives to the table and dive into everything from current events to life's big questions. We might not always see eye to eye, but that's exactly why we're here. To listen, to learn, and change our minds sometimes. So grab a seat and join us for honest conversation, unexpected insights, and a few friendly arguments. This is Half Century Hangout, where different perspectives make for better discussions. Yeah, here we go. It's great to be back. Welcome back to the Half Century Hangout. We're here in Luke's garage this weekend, or this week. And, we record a little bit before the podcast comes out. So it's almost St. Patrick's Day. And we're maybe looking at some traditions.
I love St. Patrick's Day. I am not in any way, shape, form, anything, as far as the lineage has ever proven to be a bit of Irish, but I just love it. And I think it comes back to the point that I lived in Chicago for such a long time. And it's just the place to be at St. Patrick's. So anybody that's listening, including you guys, obviously, it's a bucket list kind of thing. The St. Patrick's Day festivities in Chicago.
Yeah.
Choice. Great stuff.
Place to be.
And I will just say this. I'll give one travel bit of advice. If you're going to go, you can go watch them dye the river green. That's fine. That's fine.
The river run
That's
green.
fine. But then don't go to that parade, the one that's, the one that they would play on TV and all that.
Right.
You go to the South Side Irish Parade. That's where all the police, the fire, they're down there on the South Side. You go down there.
Yeah.
Guinness is flowing at 7:00 in the morning. You're out there, and that is my next bucket list item is kilt, cable knit sweater, Guinness, 7:00 a.m., and I will be able to play the bagpipes by then.
That's the South Side of Chicago.
Yeah, we're gonna
baddest part of town.
We're gonna have some fun. So.
There you go. That'll be fun.
That
I'm not going there this weekend, but
there's a lot of traditions that go on around St. Patrick's Day, aren't there?
Quite a few.
Yeah.
And you got to have some corned beef, right? You're going to do that.
Corned beef, cabbage, carrots, potatoes.
I will tell you, I'll say this. Here's my shout out. I'm doing my shout out a little early.
Yeah.
Because my wife, Becky, makes the best Reuben sandwiches around. So that's our St. Patrick's Day is the Reuben sandwich with the sauerkraut, the corned beef, the marble rye bread, and she makes it. Choice.
I love a good Reuben sandwich, but I just can't hardly get past the cabbage. I love cooked cabbage.
Oh yeah,
really?
We still do that.
Cooked cabbage fan.
Absolutely, 100%.
Well, without the sauerkraut, right? I mean, it's just regular cooked cabbage because obviously that's what sauerkraut is. But it's like the cabbage in the boiled dinner, as they called it, right? You do that with new red potatoes.
Yep.
You do that. It's great stuff. Great stuff. That's what I had like growing up, and then kind of. As I was in Chicago, kind of still did that a little bit, and you would go to bars, taverns, Irish pubs around, and they always had it out.
Yeah, probably one of the best. I don't know if you guys had it or not, but one of the best places around here that I've had cabbage and corned beef, carrots, and potatoes was Caddy's down on the 100 block.
Ooh. Now it's only brunch only now.
I know, so that kind of sucks. Maybe they'll do something special for
corned beef.
I don't know. I saw somewhere. I don't remember where the place was, but somebody's making Reuben egg rolls this week.
Oh wow.
That's not bad.
Some establishment. I don't remember where it was, but
I should research that.
I have seen those, and I've had a few Reuben egg rolls. They're pretty good. They're pretty good.
So I found out that I didn't find out till later in life. I always wanted to be Irish because the Irish traditions I think are so cool, and the accent's freaking amazing, right? But I didn't find out till like 2 years ago that I actually have a good percentage of Irish in me. McMahon. Yeah, that's where I came from. Dublin is where my great granddaddy came from, or whatever.
Nice.
I grew up down in Stanton, Iowa,
Yeah.
and very Swedish.
Very
town.
Swedish.
And yeah,
I was gonna
had
say,
nothing to do
I
with
thought you were going
Irish.
down the Irish road. I'm like, I don't think Stan's
No.
got a ton of Irish.
I got no Irish
I
whatsoever.
don't think so at all.
No Irish in me. Very, very Swedish and German.
Yeah.
Schultz.
Yeah. Very German.
Yeah.
I know nothing.
Nine.
That's it. You know, it's great to be a principal when you're Schultz.
Yeah. So what's our shout outs this week? What do we got? Who do we got?
Man, we
I
have
made
got
one
a
already,
lot of good things, I think, going
I got
on.
one more going. but go ahead.
One of the shout outs I'd like to give out. We got new listeners in New York City,
Wow.
in a suburb of London. It's like, I want to say Higginbotham, but that's not it. It's like Higdon or something like that. But
We don't even know how to pronounce it.
It's a
'cause
suburb of London,
yeah.
which I thought
that's cool.
was kind of cool. They found
I
us.
didn't even know London had suburbs.
Yeah, and then there was a lady on
It's a pretty big town.
on Spotify that actually gave us a good shout out about our logo. Samantha McCart.
Well, there you
Oh,
go.
that's cool.
Samantha McCart.
And that's
said,
a great
I love the new logo.
name too,
Yeah, good
right?
Irish name.
McCart.
Yeah.
I think my shout out goes to Bert Cooper. He's over in Omaha. Listen to us.
All right, Bert.
Gotta love Bert.
He's a friend of mine.
Was Bert over here last night?
Bert was over here last night.
That's
And,
awesome.
Let's
His
go,
wife
Bert.
Kathy's there, and Haley and Hope, the daughters, are there, and good folks over there, right over near Bryan High School. So,
Right
Oh,
on.
I love Bryan High School. I spent a lot of time down by Bryan High
speaking of
School.
Bryan High School, that's one of the places that we're going to go on Saturday. Is Darby's.
Darby's.
Darby's is
Okay.
right down
Darby-
over
a little
that way.
shout out for Darby's
Kind of
too.
over that way. But we kind of went down the road a little bit, but we were talking about traditions, right?
Yeah, traditions. And they're kind of threads that connect our past to our present and our future, really. And
Yeah.
and traditions help to shape us as individuals and organizations, our cultures. We could talk about habits maybe, and it's Easter time, it's springtime, and there's always a lot of traditions that go on. It might be passed through our family or companies or even educational institutions.
Mhm.
We got colors and songs and all kinds of things that happen with traditions. So
Yeah.
that's what we are going to discuss today. A little bit of tradition. Got some questions for you if you got some answers.
I think if you guys have kind of picked up on it, a lot of times, obviously, our previous topics bleed over into the next.
Right.
So those connections that John talked about with traditions are part of what we spoke about last time, was those connections of friendships and how we build those and how that works. And
Sure.
so when we were talking about this is kind of where the tradition part came in, because we know that connects us not just to a group of people, but just to kind of life in general. It might hook us up to family. It might be friends. It might be times of the year, like Chuck was talking about, holidays. I mean, there's so many things
Right.
that we can talk about traditions. And I think that it's important for us to see them and to know that they exist and to acknowledge them.
Yeah,
you know?
and I think there may be a certain percentage of people out there, if they're like me, that may buck at that word tradition, because I'm not like proud of traditions, but I think still everybody falls into them. What I tend to use is the word rhythms. You know, those types of that's a word that I use. I have these normal rhythms of my life, but most people would probably call those traditions,
Or
right?
habits.
Well, why do you
habits.
balk at the word traditions, though? What's that?
So for me, tradition speaks of dead. Like it's just dead.
Really?
Yeah, like it's just something that is normal, check the box, no effort put into it, that I have to follow the expectations of people long before me.
Rules. You're talking about rules.
Yeah, but
And
like
and
traditional,
sometimes
you know, I tend
Yeah.
not to be very traditional, but maybe I am in a whole different way, right?
Possible.
Yeah.
I think the difference, though, and I hear what you're saying. There's actually a quote that I had seen about it. it was blindly following tradition does not mean the dead are living, but that the living are dead.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very true.
And I think though that tradition can change as the years go, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like for instance, the Bible. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The Bible has a lot of stories in it that we can look at that story in black and white and really not understand how it applies to now.
Sure.
But you have to mold it a little bit, right? To be
Yeah.
able to make it applicable
Yep.
in our day and age. And I think traditions are the same way. I think that we look at it maybe when it was put into place by whoever it was or whatever it was and whatever their surroundings were. But we can look at it now and say, okay, we could still do that, but we have a little more focus on this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there's something different. So I hear what you're saying, that you don't want to just follow a tradition just to follow it, just to say that you are. But some of them, I think, kind of like the Michigan fight song. That's a traditional thing played in the last game of the football season of college when that song is played when they defeat that team down south, over there.
The Buckeyes.
Yeah.
So when I think of tradition, it's interesting that you actually had that quote that mentioned the word dead, and that was how I described, because I didn't talk about this
I know.
before that.
I know.
And so tradition, I think it has to be like the what has to be explained by the why. Like, why do you do this thing? Why do you feel like this is important?
Mm-hmm.
And I think once I can get to the why, and I agree with the why, then the what becomes more meaningful for that.
Sure.
tradition.
Well, and we've all been in companies or organizations that have traditions.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And what you got to find, I think, is, and what you two are talking about, you got to find the ones that help you get to where you want to be. So the values, the goals of that company, of that organization, whatever it is. And you got to find the ones that fit that, and then maybe make some new traditions that will help you get to those values that you have. So really, I think traditions help you get to some of those values that an organization should have.
So we talked about St. Patrick's Day, right? It's kind of like how we kicked off this show. Do you guys know the story of who St. Patrick was?
I might a little bit.
I'm sure I remember.
Share it with us, John. I figured you probably would, John, but share it with us.
Well, St. Patrick was actually the saint who brought the Catholic Church to Ireland.
Right. So
and
I would not say the Catholic Church, though I understand
that was what he did.
I would say the gospel. He brought the truth of the gospel
he
to
did.
Ireland.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we can disagree on that, but also there's some, traditions around there. He also got rid of all the snakes in Ireland, which may be
I didn't know this piece.
a folk tale, but
a little.
who knows? Who knows?
I almost got one of those shirts the other day. Like, the snakes are gone, let's have a beer. You know what I mean? Like, it was one of those things.
Yeah, you didn't know
it was.
that.
Oh yeah, that was like that's one of the big things that he did was he got rid of the snakes in Ireland.
He got rid of all the snakes in Ireland, but Ireland may not have had a whole lot of
I don't know if there was a whole lot.
It's an island.
He basically got rid of both of them, right?
Yeah, all three of them.
Yeah, maybe.
They were gone.
But anyway, he brought the gospel to Ireland. Yeah. Absolutely. And became a saint because of it. So the Catholic Church made him a saint.
Right. And so what that tradition has evolved into today, a lot of people don't even realize. They just think it's a time to party when we're actually celebrating the gospel moving into new places around the world, right? Way back in what?
But isn't that why you're celebrating?
Heck yeah.
Because the gospel is there.
Yeah, but people forget about it.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. So that why makes more sense for me for the what.
Chuck, I think what I'm going to say is that the tradition part, there's lots of traditions that people have. And like you talked about holiday tradition.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you might not think of those negatively because it's stuff that your family did over the years or, whatever it is. And so I think there's might almost be like categories of traditions, if you want to say.
Okay.
Like if we're just doing something to do it because some people 100 years ago did it. Whatever.
It's more ritualistic.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, I would say that.
Yeah.
I'm not into that rhythm word that you use because it sends me somewhere else. But I think that ritual might be a little different. It's kind of like there's another ridiculous ritual Chicago thing, which is that bottle over there. It's called Malort. Have you ever heard of this? Anyway, I lost fantasy football league, and the loser has to drink this Malort, and that's the stuff right there.
Okay.
And if you Google it sometime and check it out, this is like the worst drink on the face of the earth. And Malort even admits that it is. They know that it is, okay? But it's like a Chicago thing. And actually on their website or on YouTube or somewhere, they actually have a contest for Malort face, which is what your face looks like after you drink some because it's so bad.
Oh, wow.
So
and that's
some traditions should die. You know what I mean?
Right.
But
now I'm curious.
But when the show is over, if you'd like to try, I would be more than happy to pour you one. Anyway, I think that, like you said, it might be a little semantics as we look at it, with traditions like with Christmas or, whatever it is. And I think that some of those things we pass down in our families, from one generation to the next, not necessarily like this global thing from a bunch of people that we probably never even knew before. You know what I mean? So some of it I think is compartmentalized a little bit.
So this is a good question. What family or cultural traditions from your childhood have had the most impact or significant impact on your adult life?
Oh my goodness. I don't know.
And how do they continue to shape your values and decision? What things? Now, like I said, I grew up in Stanton, Iowa. Very small town, very Swedish.
Mm-hmm.
We learned Swedish songs in school.
Mm-hmm.
We learned Swedish dances in school. We had a lot of traditions that were handed down. And a lot of the things that were handed down were community.
So this wasn't family. This was more of Stanton as a community?
Community, but also a family.
Sure.
I kind of look at community as a family.
Yeah.
And that's what I remember and has shaped me into my adult life. I remember that community and that feeling of being a part of something bigger than me.
Mm-hmm.
And that has shaped me as an adult and has helped me want to be that person for other people. So that might be something to think about.
Well, and I think for me, and it's difficult because you guys know some of the stories, and I'm not going to bore you with it, but it's my life's gone a lot of different ways over the years, right? And I think I probably
have lives that have.
I think I probably missed some of that. Like there's some of that where I wish that, like where I live now, like I had that group of people or that, I don't know. I could call it traditions, but it's more of, like you said, the family part of things that you do or things that you always talk about or things that you always do on this date or whatever it is, whatever that does.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that growing up when I was little, I remember a lot of those things, and a lot of it was tied with the church. I was Lutheran, and we go through these things. There's a lot of different stuff that we did. And my folks were super involved in the church, which meant that my sister and I were super involved in the church.
Right.
Which was great, but we were always at the church. We lived across the street.
Right.
And if somebody needed to get into the building, they came to our house to get the key from my dad. I mean, it was always something, right? And my parents served great for their whole life. They were very, very well involved in the church, and they did a lot of things for the church. And I think that growing up, like I was centered around that, almost to the point that, going to a Lutheran grade school and then a Lutheran high school and then a Lutheran college, right?
Right.
Do I want to say I kind of got burned out from a little bit? Because, as a teenager and then growing up, I was kind of like, well, I don't know if I want to go a different route or if I want to do this, whatever it was. But I think now as an adult, like you said, John, it kind of still has formed you into the person that you are. So the things that you think about, maybe at particular times of the year or in certain circumstances that you recall, maybe even not consciously, like it's subconsciously, that, this is how you're supposed to feel about this, or this is how you're supposed to think about this, or this is how I'm supposed to react to this, or, whatever it is, right? Like, I don't know if you guys have these, but there's those moments where, for me, a lot of times it happens to be like a song or something comes up or something is talked about, and it might take me back and I get a little emotional about it.
Right.
And I have to sometimes maybe later sit back and go, why did I feel emotional about that? And then it kind of takes me to it. I'm like, oh, now I remember. It was because of this or because of this.
Yeah.
And I think that that's how, at least for me, some of those things have formed me as a person, if you want to say.
Right.
It probably had more of an impact on my life than I even know that they have.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
I think the reality is that sometimes the way we grew up does form us, either in a negatively or a positive way. It kind of it's part of our story as we journey through life. But I grew up very different from you guys. I really didn't have much of a community up until I was probably 13, 14, maybe 15 years old that I would like identify as a community. We weren't like your little small town of Stanton, Iowa, nothing like the east end of Dayton, Ohio, like nothing like it, I mean, there's still people, they're probably mostly blue collar, but still a very different, more urban setting for sure. And, I didn't grow up in church. So we didn't have those normal rhythms of going to, those gatherings, for church or anything like that. So a lot of my traditions, if you want to call them that, rhythms really didn't start until later in my late high school years. And then after I met my wife, Jen, we started a few traditions. But it's interesting, as I was listening to you guys talk, I'm seeing my kids develop traditions. Sure. It's almost like they have a thirst. And it'll be interesting after they listen to this to talk to them and see what their thoughts are around it. But it's almost like they have a thirst for more traditions, because I don't know that we had a whole lot of those traditions.
It's kind of funny that you say that, because this year it finally came up that some of the traditions that we've had that with our kids, they're older now, right? And some of them are like, oh, are we still going to do that? Like, some of the new generation doesn't think the same way about it. They don't necessarily bring all those things in, and they're real super receptive. They think, oh, this is corny, or this is, whatever. So you kind of like, well, we adjusted it a little bit.
Sure.
And we just say, we don't have to go as full as we did before, or when we used to.
Yeah.
But I think that's where traditions for me, it's kind of like if I didn't have lasagna on Christmas Eve, something's wrong somewhere. Like something wouldn't fit,
like the world spin in the opposite direction.
Which it isn't. And we all know that. But I think that it's little things like that. It seems for me, like with my family, I mean, we're Norwegian and German, is that a lot of it's centered around food and celebrations of some sort.
Yep.
Sure.
Obviously the church part was part of it, but it involves, I mean, I know it's hard to believe, but around alcohol sometimes, okay, as I got older. But even with the kids, we sit at these tables, and you can see the bar, John, where we're sitting. My kids come out, and that's like a tradition we have now that we started.
Right.
They're going to come out and they're going to carve their names or their things into this bar.
Yeah.
And as the years have gone, at least for a couple of them, their initials changed, right? Because they got married. So they changed them, and they, which is cool. It's just kind of neat to see like a family progression of stuff, and makes you proud as a parent. And then you want to see your grandkids do it and all these things. And as I repurpose this bar over the years, this part's never going away up on top. It'll get put into whatever bar that comes in here. But I think those are the type, like you said, you're starting new things because your kids are kind of yearning for something, like they hear you tell stories about something, or, whatever it could be, but they might be yearning for it. So I think it's a way for us to connect with our kids on a different level, because they're a different, obviously, generation than we are.
Right.
And we try to listen to what they're saying.
It's
I
fun.
know they always listen to what we're saying, but they're trying.
And as we get older, I think, entering the 50s, you guys are empty nesters. I'm empty nester kind of. But as we
close, right?
as we become empty nesters, those traditions change. So it's like whatever traditions we had to like stop because our kids got married or moved out, got married, whatever. And we're just hoping at some point they include us in some of their traditions.
Right.
Right.
Well, and maybe didn't stop, but just changed. I mean, life does change, and your traditions change with life because your kids get older, they get married, and they have other families that they have to be a part of.
Yeah. And I think I mentioned it before, but like some of those connections, right? We talked about people, right, in your life in a previous episode. Like my cousin Eric, who's up north in Michigan, right? I hadn't been up there in 5 years. We used to go to deer camp every year. Every November 15th, I was there.
Right.
Okay. Well, it's been a while.
That's a tradition.
I went back this year. It's like we never missed a beat. It was the same thing.
Yeah.
Nothing's changed. We still talk and we still message each other and whatever. And we talk about deer season when it's deer season. But some of those things were embedded so hard when you were a kid and growing up in your family. And it wasn't just him and I, it was my dad and my grandpa. I have pictures all the way down the line of stuff. The ones that form you the most, they don't change. The ones that formed you that most are the same.
Yeah.
You might not experience them as often, but it's still there.
Yeah.
It's still part of you.
And it does form you. It forms you as a person. And I think I grew up in a very church family too. And we spent a lot of time at church. Uh-huh. My dad was the organist, the choir director, and did all the decorating and all that. And so you're right. My sister and I spent a lot of time at church, and church was a big part of the tradition that we grew up with.
Yep.
And family was a big part of it. So I grew up in a small town. Our small town, one of the kids that I grew up with talked about, we grew up in a box.
What's in the box?
Yeah, what's in the box? But anyway, we grew up in a box we had borders. We had just everybody kept you within that box. They sheltered you from some of the world that was going on because of the traditions that you grew up with.
And that box was kind of hemmed in by cornfields, right?
Yes. Yes.
I mean, is that kind of the direction you're going?
Interesting enough, my wife went to a football game in my hometown and said, never been to a football game where I've seen a cornfield behind the football field.
And it's different. It is coming here, not having lived here, obviously, my whole life. But Friday Night Lights was always a big thing for me, no matter where, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I remember taking my oldest son. We went to a town in Morris, Illinois, this was just a great little football town, great little town. It's a kind of a far southwest suburb of Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
Always had a really tough football program. It was great, but we went to a playoff game there on a Friday night, and we wound up putting Nathan, I don't remember how old he was. He wasn't very old. Put him up on top of the concession stand. Was closed down because they ran out of food because people got there at 5:00 and ate dinner.
Right.
So there was nothing left. So the concession stand was like a barn. It was closed down, and I put him on top of the roof so he could see the game because there was just so many people.
Mm-hmm.
But then coming here and seeing cornfields in the background of some of our games, like even some of the games we go to, there's corn there.
Yeah.
And it's like you got to make sure those guys aren't cutting stalks down in the fall and putting dust all over the field.
Right.
But I think one of the things as we're sitting here, and it's up on the TV screen right now, and this time of the year for me around St. Patrick's Day has always been, since I've grown up a little, and this wasn't a thing when I was a kid necessarily, but it's like traditions for me of watching things or doing things are about people.
Right.
It's about spending time with people and being around people that you enjoy being around.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just kind of a thing where I think that, and as I look at it, as the other ones that we talked about, like the family ones, that's what it's about.
Yeah.
I mean, the act of whatever the tradition actually is, whether it's hiding a pickle in a Christmas tree or whatever it is, those things, it's not about the actual act. It's about the people that you're with. It's your kids, it's your parents, it's your grandparents, it's your friends, it's your whatever it is.
Yeah.
Whatever it is.
Well, gentlemen, that might be enough for this week. We probably can pick this up again next week about traditions. We've talked a little bit about it.
What a great discussion, huh?
Absolutely. Wonderful discussion. Thanks, Luke and Chuck. Thank you for listening and hanging out with us here at Half Century Hangout. We certainly want you to follow us on your favorite podcast apps. Take a look at us out on Facebook. And what other platforms are we on?
We are on Twitter. We are on TikTok and Instagram.
All right. Hey, Luke, you got a quote for us this time?
I do. My old buddy, Gustav Mahler.
Gustav. I love the name.
He was a composer back in the 1800s. Tradition is not the worship of ashes, but the preservation of fire.
Ooh, that's awesome. Thanks again for hanging out with us here at Half Century Hangout. Come back next week.
Peace out.
Peace out, guys.